Hey guys, welcome back to my series on mixing Converge's Aimless Arrows. My name is Luca with Citadela Sound Production, and today we're going to be looking at my approach to mixing drums, or at least for this kind of music. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to decide what kind of sound do I want for the overall mix. And by the examples that we've heard and the song by itself, I've decided that this is not going to be like a more polished, triggered sound. This is going to be a more natural, quote-unquote, dirty sound of rock and roll music, hardcore music, whatever. And this makes our approach kind of different because we're not going to be using samples. Why? Because if you look at these little snare rolls that are present throughout the song, I just find that whenever this kind of drumming is present, that just the samples just don't do it for me. No matter how well carefully planned out they are with the velocities, with the humanizing, the randomizing, like using all kinds of advanced techniques, I just don't like it. It's just, I don't know. So I will be working with just these tracks here. The first thing I'm going to do is what I did was I listened to those two identical tracks of snare drums that I had and just flipped the phase, just to let myself know that these really are identical, and I just muted one of them. I guess this is some kind of Kurt Ballew's way of special like tracking drums for some kind of thing that he will do later on in the mixing. I don't know. I'm just not aware of his techniques per se. So let's just dig in. The first thing I'm going to do is concentrate on the overheads. Now, I'm going to try and talk about almost everything that I do, but that's not going to be quite possible just to explain every step and every thought that I have, because this tutorial would last like days if I did that. So I'm just going to be concentrating on just my thought process, my ideas, and what I want to get and how to achieve it. And maybe sometimes just I'm not going to go as much into detail as I would perhaps like to if we had more time. But I just don't want to bore you guys to death, you know. So I'm just going to go to this part over here, which is a more solid beat kind of part, and it's easier for me to like do my thing. And I'm going to start with the overheads because I want my drum sound to be very natural, to be, you know, sounding. The spot microphones are very unnatural sounding. They're recorded at a very short distance from the sound source, and that's just not the way that you would listen to drums normally. I want the overheads to be the meat and potatoes of my drum sound. So I'm going to start there. Just going to the mixer, solo them for starters, and I'm going to apply equalization. Now, I use FabFilter 2, but you can use whichever EQ plugin or processor you want. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to filter out the low end. I don't need that much of the low end in the overheads, so I'm just going to use 120 Hertz because that's a frequency below which not much is happening, and I don't really need that much kick in the overheads, so I'm just going to filter that. The next thing I want to do is I want to remove all the frequencies that I don't like, especially the low end, low mids, and the mids. Now, I call these frequencies cardboard frequencies, and I really hate them, and I especially hate them when they're heavily compressed. So before I add my compression, any kind, I just want always to filter out these, and I always start my EQing process by cutting. So let's go. So as you can tell, we've started by cutting some of the low mids. And that leaves us with the high mids and the trebles and the high frequencies like piercing our ears. Now this range right here, like from 2K to 4K, is very problematic for me because I don't like these frequencies, but if you cut them too much, you will get a very dull sounding mix without any excitement whatsoever. So I'm really careful with these. I'm just gonna like tame these 12 kilohertz as well, because I'm not liking what they're doing. Okay, let's start with this. I'm just gonna move on. This is my I'm working like these circles, and I always come back to the same sounds. I don't want to keep like one sound in solo mode for too long. My ears will get used to it, and occasionally, while I'm doing this, I'm just gonna go back to my references and see where I am. So I'll just play this Accept song that we talked about. You can see that there's some heavy mid action going on in the drums. And this is very important because the guitars in this kind of music are usually kind of cut in the middle, so that's where the drums really cut through. I'm just gonna leave this for now. Let's go to the snare microphones. So we have this snare top, which is very punchy and I like it a lot, and snare bottom, also pretty cool, very, very nicely recorded. The thing that I don't like about the snare top microphone is the cymbal bleed. The cymbal bleed is like really heavy, but I will not be using any gates because what I will get there is just like snares, and I'll get just cymbal hiss on the snares, like going tss, 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 and I really don't want that. Just cut out the frequencies below the snare's lowest frequency, which is like probably like around 120 hertz. I also don't need the highest frequencies of the snare because you can only find that these are just cymbals. Somewhere around here. Now let's clean out the low mids. Now this is where the problem comes up, because I want this snare drum to be a bit punchier, and I would love to boost this frequency here. However, if I do that, I'm gonna accent the crashes that he's playing, so I just gotta be very careful. I will sometimes use my mouth to find the frequency that pisses me off the most. This is pretty retarded. I only have like one here. So I'll just find 5.8K because this is the double of. So this is so much better. Okay, the following step is just adding some compression for the snare. Now I don't use too much compression. I hate using too much compression, and the compressor I use is the CLA 76, which is 1176 simulation. And the thing about that one is that the attack is completely reversed. So this is extremely fast attack and this is slow attack. So I'm just gonna have this slow attack like around here and a very fast release. Keep gain reduction to a minimum. Output, just no clipping. And I'm just gonna, you can hear immediately how all these frequencies are from the like mids and stuff like that. These harsh frequencies are getting really like accented. They're really, you know, like pointed out in this kind of setting. So you can now use the equalizer to feed the compressor in certain frequencies and then pull them down. And this would sound very differently if you didn't have your compressor on. So this is just a thing to keep in mind, that for me personally, creating sounds of certain elements in your mix, especially the drums, especially the sounds with transients, is just feeding the right frequencies into your compressors and removing the ones that you don't want to hear. Okay, I'm just gonna leave this for now. I'm probably gonna want to make it like more sharp later, like more like crispier sound, but let's just get to the snare bottom mic. I'm just doing the same thing. Some people like to have their snare microphone just like for the crisp and for the attack, but not me. I like to have my snare microphone more like for the depth of the drum. I like it to be like more like a full frequency range, and I even cut some of the high frequencies out. Okay, I will use a little bit more compression just to get that sustain. Okay, I'm just gonna do level these two out now. You can see that the snare sounds much more natural with both of these in. Okay, let's move on to the kick drum. As I said, we're going to be coming back and forward through these channels during our mix later when we do our guitars, but we just gotta have some kind of starting point. We have two channels of the kick drum. Let's start with the more pointy and clicky one. This sounds pretty good the way it is already. I'm just gonna remove some of the low end because I will want that to be used from the sub kick. No, I don't want my kick sounding too like slappy and schlappy, like this sound. I hate it. So I'm just removing this 2.5K, and I just want to get rid of all these mids that are making the kick sound kind of boxy. But I also don't want to get too aggressive because then I will lose the body. Okay, that's it for me for now. Just make these a bit more hard, and let's add the compression. You can hear all these middle frequencies kind of starting to this here. When we added the compressor, it was completely out of control. The low part. Let's see what we can do about that one. I'm just gonna do the same thing. Around 40 hertz, fine, because nothing below that is gonna be anything good. We still want some mids here just to keep the body. I'm hearing a really hard resonance in here, but what always the problem is I'm now in my room at home, which is kind of treated, but not as much. I will never know if this is like a resonance of the room or is it really a resonance from the kick drum, but I'm still gonna go along with like cutting it a bit. And I'll just find the 60 hertz, which is 1/2 of it. and of course feed everything into a compressor. Now let's get the levels of these two. There's some like rumble in the low end. Right. Okay, so the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use the Reaper's transient control on this sub kick. It's kind of way too like long, sustained, muffly for me, and I want it to be more like a hit. So I'm just gonna use this transient controller, and I'm gonna drag down the sustain. A lot. Yeah, that's way better for me. Okay, let's keep it at this for now. So the next part that I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my overheads, solo them, and then I'm going to slowly introduce my snare and kick tracks. About what I like. I like to hear still a lot of the snare from the overheads, and then I'm gonna do the same with the kick. I'm just gonna roll down this. Okay, not bad for beginning. Let's just hear our references again, just to not get lost in this frequency spectrum that we're in. I'm just gonna solo the things that we did. This kick drum is a bit out of control. And the snare is a bit harsh for now. Let's just... It's unnecessary. We're going to remove this part here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move on to our room microphones with an all new episode. Still see you guys very soon, and I hope you're having a nice weekend.